Hi, I'm Katy Thoma, President and CEO of the Chico Chamber, and I am here with Anastacia Snyder, who is the Executive Director of Catalyst. And I know that their organization's name is actually longer than that, so when I turn this over to her, I will have her give us the full name of her organization that she leads. Anastacia has been on board with Catalyst for 24 years, 19 years as the Executive Director. And I think she may be one of the first people that I've interviewed that is not a Chico State alum. She attended St. Mary's in Moraga, which she has great pride in her university that she attended. She's a big basketball fan. Anastacia is an avid runner. She's just amazing. She runs with a great group of folks and has done some great races. So maybe she'll tell us about some of her favorite races or marathons. So professionally speaking, she's the past chair of the chamber board just a couple years ago, prior to me coming on board. She's also the past president of the Chico Rotary. And also, to me, one of the most important things that she's doing and has done is that she's been appointed by a number of governors. She sits on the Domestic Violence Advisory Council, and most recently has been appointed by Governor Newsom and previous governors, so we'll talk to her about that as well. So, but Anastacia, you and I have had some conversation about sheltering in place and what that means for families, because sheltering in place, home is not always a safe place. And I've told you before that I am so grateful that my family, that I've never been touched by, literally and figuratively, by domestic violence, nor in my family. So it's hard for me to relate and understand, though I have great empathy and have admired you over the years for your work. So I would like you to share, first of all, what Catalyst does. Give us some history, because it's evolved, and you're just doing some great stuff countywide. And then share with us about sheltering in place and the challenges that's bringing to your clients and to people all over. So thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk about our work here at Catalyst Domestic Violence Services. We have been around, our organization has been actually here since over 40 years, almost 45 years. We have a very clear mission. Our mission is to provide direct client services, community education, and promote healthy relationships to the broader Butte County community. So while we are based in Chico, and that was our home since our very early days, we do provide services throughout the county for survivors of intimate partner violence.
So tell me some of the programs. What are the, because I know you do counseling, you do all sorts of services besides sheltering.
Absolutely, and I could talk a little bit about how those evolved over the years. Originally, we were a shelter program, and that's all we did was a 24-hour hotline and an emergency shelter. And that shelter was sheltering in people's private homes. So Katy Thoma would carry a pager or have a phone, and a volunteer would call and say, we've got somebody, and a family would come stay with Katy for 2 or 3 days for safe shelter. And that's all we were able to provide at that time. But then through a wonderful partnership with the city of Chico, who has been a steadfast partner in our work, we got our first shelter, and it was I think at that time it was a 12-bed shelter in a confidential location. And we've grown since then. So currently, fast forward to 2020, we actually have, like you said, a full scope counseling program. We provide therapeutic services to victims of intimate partner violence and their children, both via group and individual. Although right now, because of the shelter in place, we're only doing individual, and we're doing it over the phone right now. We have 2 drop-in centers, one right around the corner from the chamber in Chico, and then we have one in Oroville. And at those drop-in centers, survivors and family members and concerned people can get a variety of services, from counseling, legal assistance with restraining orders. If you knew somebody who you thought needed help, you could walk in, talk to one of our advocates. They could coach you on best ways to approach that person, and to talk to that person and share your concern. Like, we help with that. The 24-hour hotline is also there as well. And that number, and I'll say it now and then maybe at the end, is an 800 number. So it's 800-895-8476. And then we have probably, it is our largest program that has grown over the years, and it's been a joy to watch, is our housing program. So we had that original 10-bed, 12-bed shelter that grew to 16 beds. Then we built our own 10 years ago, literally 10 years ago, again, through a wonderful partnership with the city of Chico. We built a 28-bed facility, and then in partnership with Chico State, who did a wonderful community blitz build. I mean, our gratitude to their blitz build. They literally gifted us 4 cottages on the same site. We now have transitional housing. And recently, we've added 2 other components to our housing program, one called Rapid Rehousing and one called Housing First. And they're both very similar. It's somebody calls the crisis line. They're maybe a little farther along in their self-sufficiency. So we can assist putting them in their own place so they bypass the emergency shelter phase of maybe housing and just immediately go into a safe apartment or a safe house of their own that we can provide wraparound supportive services, both financially as well as just in general support services to move towards self-sufficiency.
So when you talked about the growth of the increase in number of beds, is that due to an increase in the number of cases of incidents of domestic violence, or is it because you're able to meet the need?
Yeah, we were looking at the needs in the community, and it was time for us to grow, and it was time for us, when we originally built the shelter and then had the transitional housing on that one site, that was our plan, right? We had done some long-term planning. We knew we needed a new ADA, fully ADA facility, preferably and thankfully 1-story. And we knew we wanted to add transitional housing. And once we did that, we were settled in that for about 5 years. We could see that we needed a variety of different housing programs for survivors. Not all survivors need or want to go into shelter, right? Some of our survivors and the people that we're working with need safe housing, their own housing for their children and their family. And so we help them to find that.
Okay. And another term you talked about, wraparound services, that you provide some wraparound services. So can you share with me and with our viewers what it means to have wraparound services? What does that mean?
Sure. For example, let's talk about a particular situation. We had a participant that we were working with. We got her into her own apartment. She was safe. However, and she was working. However, the person who was causing her harm, her former partner, would come and at her office or even at her new home and steal her car, right? So he would steal her car and destroy it, or do all kinds of things and just really sabotage her and her work effort and trying to support her and her family. And so what we were able to do with these wraparound services and with these really flexible funds was to provide, was to go and get her a simple thing, right? We were able to get her the key lock changed from her car. So now the key that he had, the extra spare key that he had, no longer worked in her car, then he was unable to steal her car. Just really those kinds of flexible funds that we're able to do. We're able to help people if they are, for example, we had somebody who went to work at a local catering company here in town, because one of the things we want to do is promote job stability. She got a job at a local catering company. She needed a uniform, and we were able with these funds to pay for a couple of uniforms, so she had, a change of clothes that she could use when she was working, which again, when money is tight or when somebody's controlling that money and you don't have access to it, here's a way that we can help.
Oh, great.
Other wraparound services also would include certainly the therapeutic services, which are really important for healing from trauma, as well as legal services if somebody needed a restraining order.
Okay, great. So I also know that over the years, and primarily in the early years, you just worked with women, but I know that actually men are part of your program. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Really, as we've evolved as an organization, and we really try to be very, very inclusive in all manners. And we were having men come to us and share their stories, and it was clear that they were survivors of abuse. And so we started very slowly thinking about how we could provide services for all survivors of intimate partner violence in our community. Because if we're going to have an impact, we can't just look at one faction, right? We have to look at everybody and provide those equitable services to everybody. So we did some planning, and we, through our strategic plan process and through interviewing both participants, female participants at Haven, as well as doing some informal surveying, survivors were saying all survivors need service. We don't care if they're male or female, all survivors need service. And so we were able to carve out space on that one site I was talking about where there's transitional housing and emergency housing. And now every single program that we run for all survivors of intimate partner violence, regardless of gender identity.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So let's talk about sheltering in place.
Sure.
So let's talk about it not being okay for some families.
Yeah. Obviously, with us spending a significant amount of time sheltering in place and things shutting down, survivors found themselves really co-located with the person who's causing them harm. And that was incredibly scary for many people. Folks often asked us, like, oh, are your calls going up? Because they were hearing that obviously when you're home with the person that's causing you harm, there could be an increase in domestic violence. Or what about survivors? I mean, that was really, I think all of us saw it on social media, right, and the news. And as I was sharing with you earlier, we weren't getting an increase in calls. That's not what was happening, because it was hard for survivors to call us when their partner is right there controlling everything that they're doing or always in the same space. But what we were experiencing initially was when a survivor called us, the type of abuse, the intensity of the abuse was escalated. So while we weren't getting many calls, when we were getting the calls, it was very, very concerning to us and what we were hearing. And we were having to really strategize, sometimes very quickly, sometimes over a period of days. If somebody said, okay, I gotta go, and just literally hangs up on us, we were hearing that a lot. And then they would call us back the next day and we would work through the next piece of the safety planning.
So for business owners, as they've sent their employees home, and they unwittingly sent them into an unsafe spot, what advice would you give to managers and business owners, in getting an indication if they've sent them home to an unsafe place?
Yeah, really what we are suggesting is that business owner or manager call us. And here's why. We can walk through with that manager some safety planning strategies, some how to talk to somebody you're concerned about. We have a lot of well-meaning people. It happened this morning. Somebody calls up and they're frantic because their friend, coworker, employee is in what they think and might be right on in a scary situation, and they just call us and say, how do I tell this person to leave? Like they just need to leave. How do I get them to leave? And that's because they care and they're well-meaning. They want the person to be out of that unsafe situation. But that doesn't always translate well to a victim of abuse and somebody who's experienced trauma. And sometimes leaving isn't safe. So what we really recommend and what we did with this person is, like, we really strategized with this person about, okay, we want everybody to be safe. Here are some things that you can do. You can give that person our crisis line. number. You can, really, it's really important to understand, and we'll talk with them. It's really important to understand that sometimes leaving isn't the safest option. And I know you want them to leave because you think it might be the best and easiest way, but sometimes it just really isn't. And survivors know how to keep themselves safe. So we will give them talking points on how to be supportive and how to make the referral to Catalyst. And then we can also work with businesses once the survivor is back in the office. We have a lot of strategies on how to create safe spaces in those offices, because one of the statistics is that people who are stalked are mostly women around the ages of 24 to 36, and that and they're mostly stalked and threatened in their workplace. So we can talk with business owners about how to keep their workplace safe.
Wow, that's great. Not great, but great
Right.
information for business owners and
Sure.
all the rest.
And there are there's a variety, there's a handful of legislation that really talks about victim and employer relationships as it relates to domestic violence and what both of their rights and responsibilities are, because there are some rights and responsibilities of a survivor and of the employee. And we have all of that, and we can talk with employees on a one-on-one basis about how to keep somebody safe still, because we know productivity. If you're experiencing trauma at home, first thing that's going to go is your productivity at work. And if somebody doesn't know why that's happening, then it could lead, to a really unpleasant situation.
Sure, sure. Well, Anastacia, we appreciate you sharing with us today. So do you want to give that 800 number again?
Yes, it is 1-800-895-8476. Or you can call our office in Chico, 343-7711, and talk to one of our advocates there as well.
Great. Well, thanks for today. We're going to get this up and out to our mailing list and onto social media. This is really important work that we do, and obviously you're committed to it. And just thank you on behalf of our community for the great work and the steadfastness that you have demonstrated all these years. So thanks, and take care, Anastacia.
Sure. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.